My name is Jane Campbell. I'm the president of the United States Capitol Historical Society that will be celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. Well, let me first welcome you to the United States Capitol. Being an intern at the Capitol is an enormous privilege. And my job is to quickly try to tell you about the history of the Capitol. The Capitol is identified as the temple of democracy. In many ways, we think of the Congress and our Capitol as the place where we come to debate, to argue, and to build our country. The Capitol is built on the highest place in Washington, D.C. The location for the Capitol was chosen by George Washington himself, and intentionally, the Capitol was set on a hill because it was to be the dominant institution. Now, in the Capitol itself, the crypt, you can look and see that this rose marks the center of the city where all four quadrants converge. So this crypt was designed to be Washington's tomb. However, it wasn't finished until 25 years after he died. So there's actually nobody in this tomb. But as a special reflection of the role of founding members of the United States, there are 13 states that have statues from the National Statuary Hall collection in this room. Every state can send 2 statues. The people have to be dead. They have to be selected by the state legislature of the state they are sent. They have to be in marble or bronze. Take a look at the old Senate chamber. Even now, when there are particularly difficult issues, the Senate will go and have a caucus in the Senate chamber. This happened during the Affordable Care debate when they were really having a hard time getting along. They went in, and somehow the majesty of that old chamber made a difference. If you go over to National Statuary Hall, this was the old House chamber. As the country expanded and more states were added, there just wasn't enough room. This now is essentially an art gallery, but the most dramatic room is the Capitol Rotunda. 180 feet floor to ceiling up to the dome, and is often really identified as the country's sacred space. This is where we gather to pay respects. The highest respect is to be laid in honor, laid in state. Only 41 people have been laid in state. It's called laid in honor when you're not an elected official. And as you look up, you can see the apotheosis painted by Constantino Bermidi, who you will hear about if you ever look at the art of the Capitol. He's one of the famous artists from the Capitol. And then if you look back at one of the most important paintings, Washington resigning his commission. The reason this one is so important is at the time this country was founded, every country in the world was ruled by a king. The idea of we the people running the country was completely revolutionary. Instead of just moving in as the military commander to run the country, he resigned his commission. And that established the principle that civilians elected by their fellow citizens have supreme authority over our government. So that painting is really important in understanding our history. My favorite story about the Capitol is the Statue of Freedom that stands on top of our Capitol. Think about this. The Capitol dome was finished during the Civil War. The Congress and the President Lincoln believed that Union would hold. Everybody is complaining, we don't have enough money, what are you doing spending money on the dome? And this is the symbol of our Union. Clark Mills, who ran the foundry in Greater Washington, relied on his apprentice, Philip Reed, who was an enslaved person. And during the time that he was building the statue, Washington, D.C., slaves were freed on April 16th. And so the last 7 months that Philip Reed was building the Statue of Freedom, he was paid as a freed man. I'm imagining that as you're coming to the Capitol, you may have some concern in the wake of January 6th. So we have really done a great deal of research about the history of the violence against the Capitol, violence inside the Capitol, to try to put what happened in January 6th in context. The last time until this year, there was a large mob of people, if you will, who overran the Capitol was 1814. That was the British during the War of 1812. But the Capitol was not without violence. The 19th century saw violence between members of Congress. Fistfights were part of the operation. So sometimes when people say, oh my goodness, it's never been this bad, we'll never survive, it's good to take a little look at history and say, maybe we've gotten through things that are even worse. The 20th century saw the emergence of violence as a political statement. The Puerto Rican nationalist shooting in 1954, that attack led to heightened security, including the professionalization of the Capitol Police. There were immediate calls to shut down the open access to the chamber, and the Congress said, no, this is the people's house. People must be able to come, but they professionalized the police. The Weather Underground bombing in 1971 was a bomb left in an unmarked men's room on the Senate side of the Capitol as a protest against military involvement in Laos. Congress again had a debate, should we close the Capitol? Again said no, and installed metal detectors. Then the resistance conspiracy bombing in 1983 was a bomb planted by a group of terrorists who were protesting United States involvement in Lebanon and Grenada. And then we had the tragic shooting in 1998. McMahon entered, but he took the gun and shot the police officer. 2 police officers died, and you can see they had the honor to lay in honor. There was a conversation, should we close the Capitol? And again, the Congress said, no, it's too important to keep it open. 2 things happened. The identification badges that you see every staffer wear were instituted, and Congress passed the authorization for building the Capitol Visitor Center. But it wasn't until September 11th, 2001, in the aftermath of that, that the Congress actually appropriated the money to build the Capitol Visitor Center. And that is now the process where you see people come into the Capitol. We believe that the Capitol must continue to be open so that the members of Congress walk through this building, which is, yes, a monument, yes, a museum, yes, a working building, and interact with school children, constituents, and remember that they're working for all of us. Some of you may be working remotely. Some of you may be working in the district. You're figuring out how to interact with your mask on, with social distance, how to reach out to people. And that is all part of the 2021 experience. We're creating history. We're creating congressional history. How do you operate in the course of a pandemic? We're building this as we go. Remember that you're walking in the steps of people who built the history of this country with all the uncertainties of their time. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to look at all the resources we have from the Capitol Historical Society. Welcome to Washington.